Suppose we have two groups of people, and to one we give a joke printed in Times, and to the second group we give the same joke printed in Arial. Which group would find the joke funnier? One of them would, actually. And I don't know what's your guess, but it's Times. The Times group would find the joke up to 10% funnier. And frankly, we have no clue why. Our best guess is that, Times is sharp and Arial is blunt, if you understand what I mean. Right, and we typically associate humor and wit with sharpness. He has a sharp mind. Yeah, I know. Still, plus 10% humor. A typeface could communicate a concept of elegance or a concept of weight. For example, we understand that the first word is heavier than the second one, right? The first is heavy, the second is elegant. If we switch those two around, it wouldn't feel right. The first logo looks okay, the second one looks suspicious. There's something wrong with it. This is not temptation, right? If we switch pictures, the first tractor would look wrong. Well, what kind of a tractor is that? So yes, a typeface could be brown in a way. It could be rugged. So there. I don't know how that one works. This is an experiment that I did dozens of times with my students. I asked them, given the choice, which hotel would you prefer for the same money? And they always give me the same answer. It's number 4. I know how that one works. But most of them prefer to stay at the hotel number 4, even though the difference is, well, negligible, some might say. I've manipulated the type because I know how those things work. So, typography creates an emotional connection. This kind of typography creates this kind of an emotional connection. Different kinds of typography create. This one is I don't care typography. This kind, I'm very Swiss and neutral. Still an emotional connection. So, what you need to do first is you need to understand what emotion are you trying to convey. What is your brand character? And frankly, this is the hardest part. Once you figure that one out, the rest becomes, well, a relatively trivial choice. What emotions can you convey with a typeface? There's no single answer to that question, I'm afraid. I prefer to teach it this way. I usually say that, okay, there are traditional and contemporary typefaces, and therefore one can communicate a sense of tradition, of sophistication, of luxury, or a sense of being modern, therefore probably cheaper, but maybe more robust, things like that. I think you get the idea. And the second dimension is warmth. One could be warmer or cooler. I don't know how you explain. Warm meaning friendly, approachable, cool meaning aggressive, dominating, stuff like that. So, for example, I work for a fairly traditional institution, Moscow State University, so I have to be traditional, but at the same time I want to be warm and approachable. So I use an old-style serif typeface, which I'm about to explain to you in a second. But for you, the choice will be different. Let me explain how the tradition is communicated, because this is an easy one. Have a look at those two typefaces. The first one is clearly much more traditional than the second one. I think we all agree on that. As a matter of fact, we can put lots and lots of typefaces on a spectrum, some of them being very traditional and therefore classical and sophisticated and complex and luxurious and pricey, and the other part being much more novel, much more robust, simple, affordable, stuff like that. What makes the difference? The obvious answer would be serifs. Right? Serifs, in case you don't know, are those pointy things at the ends of the letter S, well, the first letter S is clearly much more sophisticated than the second one. The second one is just the first one is very exquisite, right? So serifs is one answer. And the big question that I'm always asked here is, can you use serif fonts in presentations? Because most people dealing with presentations say, no, you cannot use serif fonts. And this used to be the right answer. In the era where projectors had, I don't know, 600 to 800 resolution, this was probably true, because in low resolutions projectors cannot display all those intricate details. Therefore, well, it just makes no practical sense to use serif fonts there. But at the moment, projectors are much more sophisticated, and especially if you use bigger sizes, I think you can perfectly use serif typefaces. They do give your presentation a traditional look, which might not be good for your own case. But this is not the only answer. Let me give you an example. Let me just quickly do something for you. Have a look. Do you see it? The typeface stays, well, mostly the same. I removed the serifs, but the sense, the feeling of sophistication, it just stayed, right? So how did I do that? Well, the answer is contrast. Contrast, in terms of typography, is this difference between the thickest and the thinnest stroke within one letter. The first letter has quite high contrast, the second has a negligible contrast. It has some contrast, but not too much, right? And the more contrast you have, the more sophistication you have. Let me just give that R in even more contrast. Wow, very sophisticated and not very readable, right? But lots and lots of character. This is actually a letter from a style called Art Deco, very sophisticated and expensive art style from the early 20th century. So, as a rule, if you have serifs, you have contrast, but you can also have contrast without serifs. And if you have both serifs and contrast, you have more sophistication. It looks much more historical, much more traditional, much more stable, much less risky. If you don't have serifs, less contrast, and it looks robust, it looks contemporary, it looks modern, it looks novel. If you don't do any of these two things, you just look neutral, you just look readable. What is the emotion that you are trying to communicate?